Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I am joined by my friend Tony Steuer. He is an author, podcaster, and financial preparedness advocate. And we're going to talk about life insurance today. We're going to talk about insurance, and we're also going to talk about financial literacy and things that you could do to be prepared for anything that could come to you in your financial life. So, Tony, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Misty. Excited to be here.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
As we get started, I wanted to see if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your career path and how you got to where you are now. You've written a few books, you have a podcast, and you talk about finances a lot. But what was your path, and what did you start out doing, and how did you end up being where you are today?
So I started out as a life insurance agent, and I quickly found that all across the board, nobody really understood the insurance policies that included the people who were selling it, the insurance companies that were issuing it, advisors that I was working with. And so I became a fee-based insurance consultant. California has a special license that allows you to do that. And I spent the majority of the next 30 years working primarily with wealth management advisors, financial planners, litigation attorneys, trust officers, advisors across the board. And those were primarily my clients. And then I spent some time with the California Department of Insurance Curriculum Board, where we oversaw producer licensing and education requirements. And what became clear to me is that, as I mentioned, is people weren't understanding life insurance. There were all these products out there, huge industry, but there wasn't a lot of non-sales information out there. Everything was geared around like, hey, buy more life insurance and everything. So I wrote my first book, and it actually did pretty well. Questions and answers on life insurance. I was a little surprised. I was using it more, I thought it'd be helpful for the people I worked with. And I found that there was a real demand for people to actually talk about, okay, what is a good role of life insurance? How does it really fit in? And then the most common question I got from advisors was like, okay, well, my client has all these insurance policies and they don't need all this insurance. What do we do? And so I really went down that path about like, okay, well, how do we change this? How do we change the way we think about life insurance? And that got me more involved with greater financial literacy pictures like, okay, well, how does this all fit together? That's a big part of it is financial products are often sold in isolation. And oftentimes advisors will think, well, that other advisors is handling this issue. And that's if a client has multiple advisors. And so I really became interested in, okay, how do we organize it? How do we see how everything fits together? And that's led me to where I am today.
It's interesting that you've spent so much time in this line of work, in this field, because you're right. When I was working, when I'd first got insurance licensed, all of the training that I got was about pretty much how to sell the product. Not necessarily like, how does this fit into the whole financial picture? What is the most appropriate amount? Like, how do you figure out anything besides how do you learn the product enough to say it out loud and get and so I think that there is some even in the financial world, I don't sell commission-based products anymore. I don't sell insurance, but I do look at it as a financial planner as a large need for most of my clients. I say most, not some people are self-insure, maybe they are not supporting anybody financially. There's some different scenarios, but most of the time there is this need there. But I do feel like it is an industry that's kind of it needed a little bit more education, a little bit of potentially, a little bit of a rebrand even for, what it is, because, I think some of the people who have come to me with policies really don't understand what they have and if it's right for them. So I think that's super important. And I'm curious from your perspective, why do you think life insurance is this misunderstood product?
I think the insurance industry has forgot its purpose. The purpose of insurance in general and life insurance specifically, of course, is protecting against a risk.
Hmm.
And the insurance industry, especially the life insurance industry, has gotten so focused on adding all these benefits and
Hmm.
bells and whistles and cash value and investments and all these other things that it's gotten away from risk protection. And that's the big thing. And people get turned off by the insurance industry because they're like, oh, it's not really this. You said it
Hmm.
was a good investment, but yet I have a 16-year surrender charge.
Yeah.
So, there's no liquidity. So,
Hmm.
it's not really an investment. And, I always mention to people, if you open up your insurance policy, the first thing it says is this is an insurance policy. It doesn't say anywhere inside the actual policy that it's an investment. And I think that's the biggest issue
Hmm.
is that people are not selling it as insurance. It's not being reviewed as insurance. And that, financial planners that I work with get incredibly frustrated by the fact that their clients come in and their clients are like, well, my agent said it was going to do
Hmm.
this. And the financial
Yeah.
advisors are the ones who have to break the news that their best friend and golfing buddy
Hmm.
misled them into buying these insurance policies they don't need.
Yeah, and that's the thing I remember when I first got into this business. I really, I thought when I was studying, I liked term insurance and brokerage accounts, and somebody was like, "You're going to be poor." Forever because they were like, no, you need to learn how to sell life insurance and annuities. They were going on trips. There was all these contests for these salespeople that were just selling. When we got close to the deadline, like they would sell so many policies to anybody, and it was wild. And, I quickly moved from like sales to compliance and saw that side of it, which really gave me this eye-opening perspective about how the product itself had changed from being something that is, you know, insuring against loss, insuring against basically, a loss that you can't self-insure from, to something like this is an investment, this is safety, this is going to help you. What keeps you up at night was like the biggest thing we were supposed to figure out so we could really drill down into that fear. And so I love that you're out educating people on this important product that I will say I have a lot of personally, I think is very important, but has been a little bit warped as far as um, how it's sold, what people, and what people are getting. So I think that education piece is important. I will say I'm starting to hear a lot of people getting some education from social media, from the internet about big life insurance policies, about things like using your life insurance policy as your own bank, all of these things. And so people who, are curious and want to learn more and want to do well financially are asking about all of these things. So are you seeing an uptick in some of the questions and some of the sales strategies from things like TikTok, Instagram, and social media that maybe are adding to a little bit more of the confusion when it comes to these products?
Yeah, 100%. And those are exactly the issues. I'd sort of gotten away from talking about life insurance for a couple of years
Hmm.
because I was burned out. And I'm like, I want to concentrate on financial literacy,
Hmm.
but I've come back because of these issues. So, for example, we have a friend who's 25 years old,
Hmm.
single, she's just, no kids, no obligations, just starting out. And yet somebody sold her a life insurance policy, and that concept, be your own banker.
Hmm.
She was paying $500 a month in premiums instead of, putting that aside
Yeah.
towards, other accounts,
Hmm.
retirement accounts, whatever you want to call them. And, when we went through it, she's all like, well, I was told that I'd be able to get access to my money, that, you know, it would fund, all these different things. And we looked at it and I'm like, well, you have the surrender charges for 15 years. You're going to be paying for the cost of insurance. And that's the thing that's often
Mm.
omitted from these things is like, well, you're buying a life insurance policy. So the insurance company is going to charge you for the insurance.
Yeah.
The other thing that they tell you that is completely misleading is that you're borrowing your own money,
Mm.
becoming your own bank. Except, If you're your own bank, you're not going to charge yourself interest. And insurance companies charge you interest on policy loans, and that can be up to 8%,
Yeah.
sometimes even a little bit higher. So are you paying 8% on your own money? I
Hmm.
don't think so. It's the insurance company. You're taking money out of your policy. And I think that's one of the other misconceptions. And then when we looked at the cash value, it was going to take, I think, like 17 or 18 years before the cash value equaled the sum of premiums paid. And that's if everything went well.
Right.
So this was an indexed universal life policy, which depends on stock indexes. And as we all know, indexes go up and go down.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't get that nice steady return that's projected. So the return is almost always lower than projected. And a lot of this is they say like, oh, well, this guy, Nash, I can't remember his first
Hmm.
name now, you know, he was an Austrian economist, and there's this whole myth.
Yeah.
Well, when he said he wrote his first book about this, he said it was based on this really obscure economic theory. So it's not even a real theory, but that's what I'm seeing. And those are just some of the basic issues with it.
Yeah, and that, you hear about somebody who's 25 years old trying to make a very, smart decision, has $500 a month that they're putting somewhere. And then this whole, finding out really what's happening here, it's so frustrating because that could cause that woman to change her total mind about about investing, period, about talking to financial professionals. And I've seen that with some people who've bought expensive insurance products, annuities, life insurance, and then felt like they'd gotten, the raw end of the deal. So I do think that that's where this education and literacy piece can be so important. And for some people, like this obscure economic policy, maybe for some, depending on their wealth, their tax bracket, how much money they're actually stuck. So it doesn't take 17 years for it to have cash value. There's differences that I don't think that everybody understands might not apply to them. Same thing happens with tax advice. You're seeing these things, but they're not necessarily appropriate for you. They're just, getting clicks or views or like somebody's getting paid for all of these things that we're seeing. And insurance professionals can get paid quite a bit on these life insurance policies. So definitely important to really understand what you're buying and why. And I do think for insurance that the first thing should be the need for insurance. And there is a big need for insurance. So I'm curious your thoughts on, because there is this big need for it, a lot of people who've unfortunately needed life insurance or had life insurance and it came in and it helped them. Like that is something that can change the whole trajectory for your family, and for your whole life. So why isn't this conversation approached in that way more often? Why is it avoided when it comes to thinking about your finances and literacy? Why is insurance not talked about more for the true need of it?
Well, I think you hit on it is I think so many people get turned off by the life insurance industry. So take this friend of ours, for example, is she's going to have a very negative view of the life insurance industry. And so she's going to be resistant, probably even when a financial planner says, hey,
Hmm.
you need a life insurance policy. She's going to remember this. And what I've seen is that financial planners also, because they've seen so many bad policies for their clients, is that they're often like, well, I don't really want to deal with the insurance because it's a bad experience. I don't know who to refer my
Mm.
clients
Mm, that too.
to have a good experience. And that's a huge
Hmm.
issue. So I think a big part of it is also that we don't look at this from the goal first that clients have. Rather, we oftentimes talk about the product first. And what you alluded to in the insurance industry, their job is to sell insurance policies. And, so when you go to, let's say, a Mercedes dealership, you're not surprised if they try to sell you a Mercedes
Hmm.
car. That's what they're there for.
Yeah.
But an insurance agent will say, well, we're here to help you take care of your insurable needs and blah, 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 or we're a financial advisor. But their job is to sell you an insurance policy. And so, of course, if your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And that's what happens
Hmm.
is we're going to insurance people instead of thinking holistically
Yeah.
about our financial plan. And this gets back to why I became involved with the financial literacy
Hmm.
movement is because there's a root cause is that we don't realize people don't talk about like, well, insurance is just a tool in the toolbox and it fits a specific need. It's not anything beyond that. And I think that's the bigger problem is that we have to join everything together in our financial journey and then just use tools we need at the time we need them.
I think that's true. And I have felt sometimes where I've seen insurance needs that I have wondered who to send people to. I have a fantastic property and casualty insurance person. I have people that I know exactly how they, and life insurance, it's a little bit different because, like you said, they are working for insurance companies, their sales goals. It's sort of a different product than what some people, who are selling other insurance products can be very straightforward. And I do think that that is something that, could be missing, but obviously, I feel like that is part of our job as financial planners or independent advisors to find those people and figure out, what we could do to make sure that our clients have what they need because insurance is such a huge need. And I noticed though, even with the property and casualty side, a lot of people they have something, but they don't look at it, they don't pay attention to it. So, from your perspective, how often, like, should somebody review their life insurance policy, and what do they need to look for if maybe they have one, but they don't really understand what they have?
Well, I think you should review all of your financial products on a regular basis, at least annually or when you
Mhm.
have a major life event. But if you're not sure what you have, is that's should be a red flag to you. If you're not sure what purpose it's serving. So, let's say you do have a whole life insurance policy. Whole life insurance in and of itself is a great product, but only for specific needs. So ask yourself, like, okay, well, what problem am I trying to solve? So don't start with a question of, like, is this whole life insurance policy good or bad? Because that's not really the first question. The first question should be like, okay, do I need life insurance? How long do I need it for? Then you can take a look and go, okay, well, is this enough life insurance? Is this too much life insurance? Is this insurance going to last as long as I need it to? Or do I need insurance for
Mhm.
5 years because I want to make sure I have enough coverage until my children graduate from college? And then we're done. My wife and
Mhm.
I, I'm just using my wife
Mhm.
as an example here, don't need life insurance beyond 5 years, but yet I have a whole life insurance policy that's going to go to age 120.
Mhm.
What purpose is that serving?
Yeah.
So those are the questions that you really need to ask is to come back to like, okay, what problem am I trying to solve? And is this the right product to meet that need? And then with life insurance, the next question is, do I understand the product that I have? And with any product or service, my belief is that if you don't understand it, it's probably not the best product for you.
Yeah.
That you should understand all the products and
Mhm.
services you're paying for. And if you don't, that's an issue. And that, then you may need somebody who can help you walk through your options. But that's really it is like, okay, what am I trying to accomplish? Is this the right thing to get me to my goal? And do I understand it?
Mhm. Yeah, and even Warren Buffett doesn't invest in things he doesn't fully understand. So it's not a question of, oh, these people are smarter than me. I should just do what they say. It's really you should understand what you own, why, and how it fits. And I think sometimes a lot of the people listening to this show are business owners. So I do think a lot of times we think about our mortgage primarily for when we need life insurance or a baby. But there's other ways that people can, think about life insurance when certain things like change as far as different stages in their life. What are some ways that it can be useful for business owners, or maybe partnerships or anything like that, that people can use it in their business, not just for protecting their home or their family, but in other ways for that type of planning?
Well, the most common way is to fund a buy sell agreement.
Hmm.
And, one of the things we haven't talked about that often gets overlooked from the conversation is beyond life insurance is disability insurance.
Hmm.
And that is, I think one of the most overlooked products in the whole
Yeah.
financial services world. But both of those fund against the death or disability of a partner or multiple partners, if you have a larger partnership. And so it's very common for partnerships to maintain life insurance and sometimes disability insurance. Another popular use is key person indemnification. So let's say you have a rainmaker in a firm, the person who's bringing in a lot of business is it may be hard to replace that person. So you buy a life insurance policy to replace them, or the founder, who brings, something unique to it. Like, let's say Steve Jobs with
Yep.
Apple. That was a huge transition when he passed away because he brought so much to it. And so a life insurance policy can provide some extra cash to keep the business going, especially with a smaller business to pay the costs of just keeping the lights on, paying the employees, but also to recruit some new talent. So
Yeah.
those are a couple of the most common uses.
Yeah, they can be very important, very helpful in keeping a business going. I mean, same way you would think about it for keeping your household. So definitely important. And I'm glad that you brought up disability insurance. This is something that I talk with my clients about all the time. A lot of times especially my self-employed clients, there is such a bigger risk for them experiencing or temporary disability, and this policy doesn't seem to be one that a lot of people have picked up, learned about, know how to get, or feel like it's, a good use of the money. I personally got a disability policy because I understand if I can't, if I can't work, there's things that I'm going to have to pay somebody to help me do, or, and then a lot of times with, other professions that are more. I know I work with hairdressers, other people that are that have physically demanding jobs, massage therapists, other things where you're actually, if you can't move your shoulder, you can't work for a while. So talk to me about how somebody might want to go about finding disability. Is it, should you look at what are some of the ways that people can look at disability insurance if they think it might be something that they need, but they're really not sure where to access it in an affordable way?
Well, that is a great question because there are not a lot of people selling disability
Hmm.
insurance, and that is a huge problem. So the starting places, as you mentioned, associations
Hmm.
can sometimes offer a disability insurance program. So that's a great way is, check with your employer. If you work for a larger company, you have
Hmm.
some
Yeah.
disability insurance. However, if you have group disability insurance with your employer, it usually has a cap of coverage as well as it usually provides maybe 50% of your pre-tax income. So you probably don't have enough disability insurance, especially if you're a high earner or, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
with a self-employed person. Um, I'm working with a fintech firm that's
Hmm.
going to introduce a solution. Unfortunately, we don't have it
Hmm.
ready yet. So, I'm trying to think of the best place to find disability insurance beyond um, an association right
Yeah.
now is really, I would say, just checking with your network.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have a good answer for it,
Yeah.
and it is a huge problem because disability insurance is, well needed. So I would say, just try to, um,
Yeah, it
yeah,
is
find
worth
somebody
getting,
locally.
yeah, getting curious about it, asking around, finding, and yes, for people who do have some coverage at work, like you said, sometimes it's 50%. However, like if you're still alive. Your bills aren't probably going to be reduced by 50% if you're disabled. Your expenses might go up because of this disability. So I do feel like increasing that is one of the things that we do with my clients when we review their workplace benefits every year is we increase that one. And it's actually in the group plans usually pretty affordable to do that. But for some people that are looking to shop for it independently, I'm glad to hear that you do have some fintech solutions that are in the pipeline and working, because I did want to talk about fintech because we talked about insurance agents and possibly, like selling products, but I have seen a lot of people come to me with the idea of, some of these online insurance companies, some of the fintech that's selling life insurance and asking, what is this any good? Is this worthwhile? So I'm curious your thoughts on fintech, how it might be disrupting the insurance industry. And are there any bright spots here for people who are looking to get coverage simply that want to make sure they have enough? What are some of these solutions? How are they looking to you?
Well, that is a wonderful question. And, like with everything else, there's good and bad
Hmm.
side. With life insurance, some of the more popular platforms have made the buying process easier. However, the coverage oftentimes has limitations. They use something called accelerated underwriting. However, because they don't do the same underwriting as you would for an individual insurance product, is sometimes, especially if you're in great health, you're going to pay a little bit more because the insurance companies have to offset that risk.
Risk.
So, that's a job of an insurance company is to assess risk and then to price that risk accordingly. And sorry, wandering off the reservation a little bit, but here in California is, homeowners insurance rates are going up because there's more wildfires.
Yeah.
So the insurance companies are pricing risk. So to walk that back to the fintech solution, that's something where the insurance companies aren't able to assess the risk to the same depth, then they're going to be more conservative in their pricing, which means that they're going to
Mhm.
charge more. So that's the offset that you're paying sometimes for that convenience. But it is a nice, smooth process with a lot of these companies. And I think it is going to long term have a good positive impact because, Misty, it sounds like you've dealt with a lot of insurance companies, so they're very archaic with their whole process.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the insurance companies still use fax machines.
Yes.
So, you know,
Yeah. No, and I do think that I like to see the innovation. I know with my life insurance that I have personally, and I worked for John Hancock for years, and so I might have a little home team bias, but I feel like they are getting more innovative with the pricing and the term policies and the wearing your watch, and if you're active, your policy rates go down. So I do feel like there is this like potential for the industry to really change, really help people live longer, healthier lives, um, and try to obviously that's the goal for the insurance company. I hope my term policy never pays out. I hope that, once and so I do think that there are some things that are happening that are actually pretty interesting and pretty cool to see in a lot of these spaces that have been very, very kind of archaic in the way they do business. So it is good to see that. But yeah, more to come probably in the fintech. I do see it. Yeah, I do see a lot of um, different different innovations, different ways to make it simpler, make it, less barriers to entry. But like you said before, sometimes if you are healthy and active or young, when you're getting these policies, just like a group health insurance plan at work, you're paying for everybody. The healthy people, the unhealthy, everybody in between. Sometimes, getting your own insurance could be better if you do look externally for those things. So it's an interesting space. I did want to talk to you though before we move away from insurance. I just want to see, are there any other tips you have about insurance for people to make sure that they're properly insured? Anything that you think that they should do is like a best practice when it comes to, their life or disability policy? And then I want to talk about financial literacy for a little bit.
definitely. Well, the bottom line on insurance is that for people to really think about what their need is,
Hmm.
and then to find the product that fits their need instead of, walking back to what we were talking about social media is getting a product and then trying to make it fit into our lives. And I think that's a big thing,
Yeah.
like we talk about disability insurance and long-term care insurance sometimes, for somebody who's aging, is think about like, okay, well, what is my exposure? What are the risks that I have in my life? And is it worth it to get insurance? Like you mentioned property and casualty
Hmm.
insurance, which is auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and those types of risks is we know, okay, Like with our house, it's a risk of burning down. So we need fire insurance. But in California, there's a risk of
Yeah.
earthquake. So we have an earthquake insurance policy. So it's also knowing what your coverage is,
Hmm.
what your policies include, because the average homeowner's insurance policy doesn't cover earthquake or flood. So it's important to say, okay, well, these are the extra risks that I have. But if I live in the middle of the country and there's no earthquakes, then buying earthquake insurance makes no sense.
Hmm.
So you can apply that rule across all the insurance is think about like, okay, what's at risk? What can I not pay for out of pocket? And if I can't pay for it out of pocket, then I need an insurance company to help me offset that potential huge risk.
Yeah. No, those are definitely good points. There are all different types of insurance. I know that that's something when you look at it, in Massachusetts where I am, a lot of people, it's their homeowners insurance is now flood and the prices are going quite skyrocketing, so people are paying attention to insurance now. I think in some ways, at least in New England, because they have to. California, same thing. It's right, it's front and center as far as their budget and their expenses. So I think it is always important not just to shy away from it and be afraid if you look at it, it's going to go up. If you look at it or try to see what's out there, that it's going to get worse. Sometimes it is important to take a look at what you need. Maybe you need more, maybe you need something different, and just to make sure that, like you said, that you're properly protected for these risks that could be financially devastating. Um, I want to talk about your latest book, The Get Ready Blueprint. It lays out 52 weekly actions to help build a better financial life. So I'm curious, why did you lay this book out in this way, in this manner? And tell me a little bit more about how it can help people who are trying to take positive action in their financial life.
Well, the whole goal is, as we talked about earlier, is to help people make sure that they review all areas of their financial
Hmm.
lives. Is there's so many things, financial products, where we set it and forget it,
Hmm.
where, like how often have you reviewed your bank accounts? Like most of us
I
have,
know.
have used the same checking
Hmm.
account for
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years. And so that's part of it. That's one of the weeks actually in the
Hmm.
book is, like review your bank accounts. People aren't using ATMs as much, but that's one of the things. Do you still have an ATM close by, or are you
Hmm.
paying $4 every time you withdraw cash from your ATM? Is there little actions that you can take? Like high savings account,
Hmm.
high yield savings accounts are another example of bank accounts, but that's just one of the weeks. So what I am trying to do is help people. And the thing is, because it repeats exactly the same way every year, people can subscribe to my newsletter by joining the Get Ready movement. It's completely free. I send out the same weekly action item. Um, is that if you miss a week, you can review it the following year. But the idea is to encourage people to look at these different things once a year to think about it. One of the weeks, for example, is health insurance because I did an open enrollment years ago. Misty, I
Hmm.
don't know if you ever did open enrollment,
Oh yeah.
but employees tend to just choose the same thing
Hmm.
they had the year before. Or the more common thing is like they ask their coworker, like, what are you
What do you
choosing?
do? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because they
Hmm.
have no clue what and how would they possibly know? And I think that's the basic thing with financial literacy is our industry expects people to know things that how could they possibly know what a certain financial service or product is? Where in our lives would we have ever possibly learned that? And so, that's part of it is I cover the basic concept of something. So with health insurance, for example, I say, think of these things at open enrollment. I don't go through every product. I
Hmm.
don't go through every permutation, but with the book, I'm trying to encourage people when they review these different areas is these are the questions that you want to think about because I believe that that's the most powerful thing we can do for people as members of the financial service community is help people to understand the right questions to ask. And that's what I do each week is say, hey, this is the thing, here's the thing to think about, and the questions to ask. So when it comes to your taxes, talk to your accountant, but these are things that you want to bring up with your accountant because your accountant isn't going to know
Hmm.
every single thing about you. And so they may not be covering everything as well. So, that's the goal is for people to understand, like, hey, look at this and here's what to think about.
I think that's important because a lot of times, like you mentioned, where we haven't necessarily learned how to do this or what to say, people think that for some reason they should know what to ask. And then they feel like, well, I don't, so I'm just not going to say anything. So prompting them with these are the questions to bring to your CPA. These are the questions. And I will say, when I did work through open enrollment, when I was at a larger corporation, people were there ready to help anyone with questions. Like they knew these policies in and out. They knew everything, what somebody did go through it with me once about the differences, what the cost would be, what you know, the worst case scenario. If we had this policy, we'd pay 7,000 in the year. If we paid this, this policy, this would be the maximum output. It was so helpful. And I felt like why isn't everybody asking these questions? Why isn't everybody like getting this sort of personalized help from this person who was really ready to kind of help everybody go through benefit season? They send the postcards, they send the emails, they send all these things, and then people again, usually, like you said, just roll into what they had last year, and it could be a totally different scenario. So I think it is really important to give people questions, give people prompts, things to think about, because sometimes we just don't really know what we don't know. And so I think that's where we could have a lot of help available to us if we know who to talk to and when to ask the right questions. So I think that this is a really, really important and a really nice way to lay it out with the weekly ideas, because I know a lot of people feel like everything is just adding to the to-do list. Every day it's getting longer and longer. But I do think that for the financial end of it, this might not take long. Some of these prompts might be checking something that takes you 2 minutes to log into and see, do you have a beneficiary in your checking account? No, add one. I mean, some of these things take minutes. So I think it's a nice way to kind of break down instead of having it feel so overwhelming and impossible,
Exactly.
which keeps people from starting. Do you have a few favorite prompts or a few favorite things that you think, that you've shared as far as some of the bite-sized tips that people have found really helpful?
Well, in terms of the tips, I think the thing that people have felt, has benefited them the
Hmm.
most is that it's broken down, like you mentioned. I tried to make it bite-sized,
Hmm.
and I think that's super important. One of the tips you brought up is actually one of my favorite tips is to check the beneficiary on your checking account and retirement account. Most people don't go and check the beneficiaries on their 401k. Now, you may see your estate planning attorney,
Hmm.
but every 10 years, every 20 years to update your will and trust, and they'll say, like, have you done this? But I can't tell you how many life insurance policies I reviewed where an ex-spouse was a beneficiary on a life insurance policy, and that's never a popular choice.
No, it's not like they're going
Um,
to give that to somebody else out of the goodness. It's not like
exactly. They're not.
no, no. Yeah, no, people accidentally disinherit, new family changes, all of these things. And I think, yeah, that's one of my favorites too, is with the beneficiaries, because if you've ever had somebody like, phew, if you're not a beneficiary, you're not listed, like you've got to wait till the states are closed, all of these things. So there's so many different things that you can do that really are. Again, if you're looking at everything you need to do, it can feel like way too much, completely overwhelming. But if it's a small thing, um, I think that can be helpful. And I have noticed, with changes in the stock market, a lot of news, a lot of headlines, a lot of, people fearing recessions, people want to take action on something. And so sometimes that doesn't mean selling everything and going, because that's not necessarily the action you could take. These are the actions. These are the things you could do. Reviewing things, making sure you understand your finances, making sure that you're doing like filling these holes that could sink the ship slow, like one at a time. I really feel like that could be the positive action that you take when you feel like doing nothing feels wrong, or it feels like you should be doing something. A lot of times people then make these radical changes. And instead, it might just be kind of fixing up and creating a better strategy with what you've got going on. So I really appreciate that you wrote this book and that you share these tips with your newsletters. And just yeah, just wanted to thank you for joining us. If the listeners can take one small step, what do you think that they should do today in order to get you know, to get on the right track with their finances? And if it's signing up with your newsletter, please let us know how to do so.
Well, definitely, I would love everybody to join the get what I call the Get Ready movement and sign up for my newsletter. You get these tips for free. I have a lot of free resources on my website. This is my way to give back. But what I really am encouraging people to do is to really change the way they think about money and to feel like they can take control of their money. I think that's the biggest thing is so many of us go, oh my gosh, there's so many things to learn and to
Hmm.
take care of that it becomes just like you said, it's overwhelming. People lock up, they make poor choices, but it's like take a breath, be curious, and to ask questions. And asking questions gives you, I think, power. If you and that's the other part is you have to know the right questions to ask. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers.
Hmm.
So that's really one thing I'd love people to walk away with is to be curious and to learn the right questions to ask.
I think that's such a great tip. I think being curious, because a lot of times there is that shame and guilt. We don't know anything. I should have learned this in high school. They should have taught, and we blame everybody in the world. But I think that that doesn't help. You have to get curious now. And then you're right, asking if we know we're asking the right questions and we still don't get a clear answer or we still don't understand things, that should be that flag for you that maybe you need to learn more. Maybe you need to really, ask things differently, or really kind of stop instead of saying, okay, I guess I'll trust you, because it is our money. It's really important that we understand what we're doing with it, that we feel empowered to make the right decisions. And I think asking questions and kind of learning what you can from people who are providing these, accessible, affordable resources is a really, really great place to start. So, if you don't mind, can you tell people how they can reach you and learn more about you if they're looking to follow you online or connect with you personally?
Well, I'm definitely very active on LinkedIn, so that's a
Hmm.
great place to follow me. And or you can go to my website, tonysteuer.com. That's a great place. You can sign up for my newsletter and find all the resources that I mentioned. I have 100 plus worksheets that
Hmm.
anybody can get for free just by signing up and joining the Get Ready movement. And also, I've launched something that's pretty cool. Is I have an AI clone that I've uploaded all my books, all of my articles. It's connected to my YouTube and LinkedIn. So, it's free. You can go in and play with it. It's called Ask Tony. I got very creative on it. And you can play with that and, get some of my thinking on some of these questions.
That's cool. All right. Well, yes, everybody. I think it's a great idea to, yeah, go to the website, check it out, talk to Virtual Tony, sign up for the newsletter. Thank you, Tony, again for coming on the show and talking about this subject. I think it's definitely provided a lot of clarity on some pretty complicated and confusing and expensive topics. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. If you want to learn more about your personal finance, you're looking to do a financial plan for yourself, or catch up on old episodes of the podcast, please head over to mistylynch.com. I would love to connect with you there and see if we can't help you get your insurance and all the other financial pieces of your life on track. Till next time, we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.